So welcome everybody. Today I'm Turmel, by the way, from RPI, also leading with from Jonathan. Welcome, Jonathan. So today we'll talk about GL transaction interface, process, business class, rules, and how to bring a file in to do posting into a FSM system. So we'll go over that and how we were able to automate that full process, which is commonly used for several clients who implement FSM in their system. So basically today we'll talk about the definition of GL transaction interface. We'll show you the actual process and step you do without any automation whatsoever. And then we'll show you what we did in our case to actually process that all the way through in a automated fashion. We'll have a right between the full automation show and hints and tips, we'll show you a live example of what we can run for what the actual process and interface that we built for that. So we'll show you a live example, and after that we'll go with the hints and tips, and we'll end with the question at the end. But anytime, you guys feel free to send us a chat with a question, and we'll hopefully when we see it, we will answer your question as we go through. So bottom line, GL transaction interface, very common thing used in FSM. That's basically to bring in all your GL and posting transaction to your system. Some users use a different system to bring in some of those legacy system transactions for posting transaction to your system. So mainly that's what it is. A GL transaction interface is the interim table or import table, if you want, to process and validate your posting transaction and to finally post to your system. So basically this is the steps we take for without any automation, none whatsoever. These are all the actual steps you need to take in order to go all the way through your system and pose these transactions. So you would have your CSV, you'll do a manual DB import, which is a common process within FSM. And then you would run that and that manual DB import, that brings your data into the GL transaction interface business class. So that's where your data resides in the interim before it gets posted. So from there, you can run several functions, and so one of those functions is a transaction interface where you can run in edit mode, which means no update. You basically want to validate your data before you bring it into FSM and do physical posting. So when you run that in edit mode, it provides you some results. And some of those results may have or may not have any validation errors. So you go through that, you assess your data. When you feel comfortable and you ran that in edit mode and everything is cool, and you have all the data in your system, the account code, account unit, and whatever you're using for your setting, it validates all that. So you can actually run the actual same transaction interface, but in update mode. That physically creates posting transaction in your system, and they will be under release status. And of course, at the end, you will have you can do a right click on those posting in the journal entry and do a quick post to actually physically post them to your system. And of course, you can close or limit close your period for the time being if you're done for that month. So that's in essence, these are all the steps you do currently, which is very tedious, long process, doing it manually. So in RPI, for one of our clients, we need to bring in some old historical data, like we call it monthly balance. And you can also process detailed transaction through this. Those could be daily, weekly, for regular transaction you can bring into your system. So what RPI build is basically, this is what we build, our famous automated process. We build the actual infrastructure. We use a file channel, and it triggers an interface to feed your system with that data. So here's a glance of what we build here. So you still prepare your CSV file, which contains your GL transaction interface transaction. Again, they could be summarized or detailed, doesn't really matter. And of course, we build a file channel. That's to automate part one of our process. Basically, file channels is in essence, the way it works is it monitors a certain folder on an SFTP that you design in your own environment. It monitors that folder, looks for a specific file name stream that you define part of that file channel. When it sees it, it grabs it, consumes it, and triggers the interface with it, and that's what it does. So at this point, we're now looking at our RPD that we built for that. It actually validates the detail file. So what it does, it pulls data from FSM because we want to validate our accounting unit, account code, finance dimension 1. And again, this would be based on your setting for your own application for that particular client. So it does extract the data from FSM to validate against it. And also it does a nice detailed JavaScript detail validation on a lot of fields, and Jonathan will mention that later on in more detail. So in essence, we do pre-validation before we load that file. If there's no errors, we load that file through DB import. So again, all No more manual steps. The actual interface does that for you. Brings the file into GLTransactionInterface business class. It actually runs it in edit mode, which means no update. I'm scanning my file, running that, make sure there's no errors. If there are any errors, the actual system will pick it up and sends an email with results and stop right there. It won't process it. It won't create transaction and posting with it. It stop at that validation mode only. If there are no errors, that means we're confident we can run this same thing. So the interface transaction, we can run that into update mode. So that literally creates your posting in release status. And I've seen some system, you can actually have the posted automatically turned on. So that means it will actually create your posting transaction as a posted status. So this, you may or may not do manual posts depending on your setting of FSM. So that's essentially what we built. So we're gonna show you, Jonathan will talk about some of these steps in the next future slide. And after all this, we're gonna show you a live example of all the stuff we're talking about right now. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you, John. So as he said, I will be taking a closer look at the whole process, which starts right here. After producing the GLTransactionInterface CSV file, it will be placed in a predefined folder on an SFTP server. So this is where we will deploy the use of a file channel. If you want a flow to utilize a file and you want it to be triggered as soon as that file is made available, that is the prime use case where you'd want to create a file channel. Our file channel constantly scans the specified SFTP folder for a file name matching the GL transaction CSV, and upon finding it, triggers the process flow. So this is our process flow. Jean, would you mind taking that over to the actual IPD? Thank you. So our flow begins with these 4 nodes right next to the start. They gather the work unit and use it to create the footer for the email notifications. Then you have the section down here with all the variables you need to check against the system for accuracy. We do this by gathering all the system's values in a list, and then we compare that to the file value. In the example, we are gathering the account code, the accounting unit, and finance dimension 1, but this could be customized to whatever variables you needed. It then scans the contents of the file for pre-validation errors. We'll be getting a little more in depth on this later. We can also do an extra check to see if the targeted period in FSM is open. Assuming no errors are found, it performs a DB import. It then uploads the file in an edit-only setting and checks for non-pre-validation related errors. If errors are found, we notify the user of any and all errors. But if there are no errors, it uploads the file in an update setting. And that concludes the flow. So then, Jean, you can pull up the PowerPoint. Thank you. So then getting back into the individual processes, we have pre-validation. Pre-validation starts by gathering information from the system that you would want to pre-check in the file. For example, we gather the account codes. We want to make sure that the account code in the file matches one in the system. And to do that, we have to check the file value against our system list. After the setup is complete, we perform dozens of tests on each record of the data and catalog all the failed tests as errors. If any errors exist, an email is sent out to notify the user of all the issues with the file, and the process ends at pre-validation. There we are. As I mentioned, we have dozens of tests that we run to pre-validate. These are some of the major ones. In terms of some of the major types of validation that we perform, they include testing a field for an exact value, testing a column for uniformity or uniqueness amongst all of its entries, ensuring all dates are valid, and testing if a value exists in the system. So then, as I said, these are more of the standard pre-validations that we perform. As you can see, there are literally dozens. Not only are there all the rows of this table, but within each row, often there are multiple tests. In date, we're not only just testing one thing, we're testing the day. You know, it can't be on the 32nd of the month, can't be on the 13th month. You know, there are tests we perform on the year, that kind of thing. Keep in mind, This is for a specific client configuration, but these settings would be very easy to customize to accommodate any client.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the DB import. This is pretty straightforward. Assuming no pre-validation errors exist, the file is imported into the GLTransactionInterface business class. Then after the import, we perform a transaction interface action in edit mode. This enables us to see the results of an upload without actually updating anything, and it then analyzes the results and notifies the user of any errors. So assuming edit mode shows no errors, we perform a transaction interfaces action in update mode. This will take the transactions from the GLTransactionInterface business class and post them with a release status to the general ledger transaction business class. So then finally, these release records can be posted using quick post. Close the period if there will be no more postings for this period. In the standard version, we leave this out, but upon request, even this last step could be automated in FSM using a system configuration. Final big disclaimer, we don't recommend using close final. If you close final in a period, you can never reopen it, and you'll have to phone in for it. Never fun, never fun. And that is a more in-depth look at the whole process. Jean, feel free to take it away to the system.
Very good. So before we jump in on the hints and tips, let me show you a quick example of what we have as far as our system. There we go. So what I have here. This is the RPI FSM system, just to show you at a glance. You need several icons, and I use Rich Client in this case to show you, but you may use the web UI version of it. But this is the actual. So under application administration, I go in. So under financial, and of course I'm going to go under global ledger. I just want to show you where those screens are that I have already open on top. Under processing, that's where your data transaction is happening. It's under processing. And under processing, you have transaction interface, which contains transaction interface and the actual results. So I won't open those, but those are the two I need that open right here on top. Part of those same function, you need also to open your screen on the journal side. So you want to open that journal, which I already opened up here. Journal is and that's a journal right here, a submenu. Journal is where you have posting on the release and posted, so you want to monitor that. I also go back, if you also see period close, I also use this, and it's called period list when it opens. So period list is what you see all your periods if your periods are open or closed, and so that's where you would monitor that. So these are the screens I have open, which I'll be navigating through. And then of course file channels, so we'll go through that. For the time being, what I would like to do is provide you an example. So like Jonathan mentioned, we have file channel, we use SFTP folder, so that's where the file channels. So this is the RPI SFTP folder. We pre-build an architecture in a GL transaction subfolder, and that's where we're going to drop our file. This is where the file channels monitors that environment and that for specific file name. So I'm gonna send over a bad file there that I created this morning, and basically the file channel is waiting for that. So every 5 minutes, this file channel scans through it, and it will actually go over and monitor that. So let me go under file channel. So that's the file channel we built for it. Pretty straightforward to build. All it is, you specify where you point, which SFTP, which folder to scan, what file name to look for, and all that. So I'm going, instead of waiting 5 minutes to make you guys wait, I'll trigger that just for the time being. So scan now. I'm simply forcing the file channel to run right away. And so that's what it will do, is it will run the scan of that folder, it detects the file, and it will trigger the actual interface that we associated with that right down here. So once that's scanned, so while it's running, when it comes back, I'll show you the different screens that we're gonna use to navigate through that and what the process does, where things goes once this is running. So we apologize for the delay. This was working this morning. So in essence, that's what we're doing. So we're triggering the file now, so it triggers. So if I open the live work unit, that triggers the actual interface. It detected the file and it ran that. So, and I know this is a bad file with a couple of transactions, but keep in mind this process runs for a couple of minutes because it extracts all FSM data that it needs to compare against, and it goes through all that. So by the time, so while it's running, let me explain to you some of those tables that we use or screens and function. So that data is currently running. If there would be no error, it would actually take that data and write it to this global ledger interface list. Basically, if I go like this, Control Shift Left Click, that's the business class, GL Transaction Interface. That's where your data gets written into. It's like a temporary import file if you want, and that's where you can actually use these files and records to actually process them in an edit mode. So if I would pick one of those, I'm still waiting for mine to be executing, but this is where we actually manually run those transaction, interface transaction, and that will bring you a screen to run it either in edit mode or update mode. And you can also specify if you want to summarize or detail your transaction when you post them. So this is where you do all that function manually, and that's what the interface does for us right now. So essentially right now it's running, it's validating. If there would be no errors, that's what it would actually do, all these steps all the way through, which we have another file that will do that right after this one. So right now we're still validating that file. This screen right here, which is the interface, journal interface list, that's a result. So those are examples I ran earlier yesterday and this morning. So you can actually run in edit only. So that's the edit result. There was no error right here, error record, no error. And actually the actual interface loaded the file in update mode, so actually creating release posting with that as well. So these are a few examples we ran, but we're going to rerun them to show you where things goes as it's still running. So if I keep monitoring my work unit, still running, and when it completes, it will send us an email to say, oh, you got some error validation, which I want to show you after that. So while that's still running, so we have, of course, when you run your interface transaction and you actually post them in edit mode, it creates journals. So this is the screen for journals where you can have release tab or the posted tab. So normally when you run them in edit mode or update mode, it creates posting under release. That's where they go. That's where they would reside. If they would be here, you would have to right click and then quick post. That's where you would do your actual physical posting. As Jonathan mentioned, if you configure your system to, as soon as you create posting under release, they could be automatically configured to post directly after that. So it does that quick post for you. So you can actually essentially make this 100% fully automated if you wanted to. Simply configuration on your side on FSM to do that. So these are examples of posted transaction that we did yesterday, I think. Yeah, we did those two examples, which we are rerunning a new one for you guys today. So it's still running. Let me see if we got still finished. I didn't get the email yet. So error found. So this is an example of, let me show you right here. So this is an example of the email we got from this run. So it's still executing, but it's going to complete. And basically, the email generated, RPI likes to do it this way. We have the footer, like Jonathan mentioned, we build a footer. Nice information for the IT team to monitor all their interface information, the interface name, which environment you're in, the actual version of your IPD, and actually the work unit number that you ran. And here's what the detail of your actual CSV file for that GL transaction interface. These are your run group. Run group is critical. It's a key thing throughout this process to process your file all the way through. Run group is what you use to actually process that file, and that's what you use to delete that file or purge data. This is a key field that must be unique within your file. So that's why I always recommend to use the same run group within your file so you can process all the same transaction linked together, all together. So while you process your file, the very first transaction it detects the first transaction date, it extracts the year and the month. So that's, to me, is the actual target month or period you try to target and post against. So for us, means all the other transaction and posting date must relate to that as well. So you have a zero balancing credit and debit file. So in this case, I force it not to be the same. I'm 12 cents out. And here's a list of all the errors that we encountered throughout this process. So it validates, make sure you're using the right company or financial enterprise group in this case. We validate sequence number, like if you get a 1, 2, we always expect the next record to be a higher sequence number. In this case, I force it to be 1, 1. So that didn't work out. The accounting unit, I did that on purpose. This should be 12 fin for finance in our case. This accounting unit, this department does not exist, so I force an error like that. I use 32 as the date in one of those dates to force an error out. I use a USA instead of USD for currency. Core, I use Core. So it truly detect anything that's not configured in your FSM system. This guy does a full detailed validation. And that's what Jonathan mentioned. We can actually configure these validation to fit your need for based on your system, based on your value, your settings and configuration. We can actually easily adapt that for your needs. And of course, the file detects for zero balance. That's crucial to bring that posting to FSM. It must be a zero balance file. And of course, this is a last piece we added in these recently. We also, not only those months and the year and months we're trying to target, you're actually physically trying to target a period in FSM. We also verify to make sure it's an open status, not closed or final close. So you can't post if it's closed. So in this case, we wouldn't even load data if any of these items are happening here. So that's basically what's happening now. So for this validation. So having said that, so I'm going to switch over to go back to FSM. This should be done by now. It's completed, yeah. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to and we use a good file. So this is I changed the run group to have _2 for this example. So I'm going to upload that. So it's uploaded. Again, I'm going to go in FSM to trigger that thing right away, so we don't have to wait 5 minutes to get that process. Scan now. So this is the same file, similar, but no errors this time. Shouldn't be any errors. And the fact I triggered that, so now I'm monitoring the work unit, live work unit. So that's what I need to monitor that process. So this is the same thing as if you would have another batch interface. This is where you monitor all your interface being running. And right now I turn on all the detail logging for it, and so that's helped me to go through all the way through it. I want to bring your attention to when you run this. So as I mentioned earlier, when you're into this screen, GLTransactionInterface, when you run one of those action or function here, as far as interface transaction, when you trigger one of those, either edit mode or update mode, what it does, you guys need to be aware under async, your async page, there is a dedicated queue for that, the GLTransactionInterface. So anything that happened, and you'll see if I keep refreshing this, when we get to that point in interface where, like Jonathan mentioned, it runs the transaction interface in edit mode, and then after that in update mode, and so on. So this is where the reason why I'm bringing you here is something to keep an eye on. If you see your interface runs and it stopped for a while, it's not doing anything, what happens? So the work unit is one thing to monitor, but your queue is also something else that keep in mind. Your queue can actually fail and be stuck here. All you would have to do is right click and restart your queue. And this happened to us, and let me show you why. Is part of our interface, we have a wait node right here. So during the time you do your actual edit mode only, and you run to scan for result, if you trigger the next one too quickly, you're already within the two, so the second one will fail. That's where you say, hey, you're trying to trigger something that's already running. So that's and I ran to that issue in the past. So just want to point out this the queue aspect of things. Any function or action you do within a FSM or HCM often use a queue process behind the scene. Usually it could be this queue or a common default queue and something like that. So you have to learn where your queue reside and being used against that process. So I'm still monitoring my process. If I go there, refresh my work unit, live work unit. So 2 minutes, I'll go check my emails to see if I got any, let me close that email. See, no error found. So let me show you no error found. So this is the first initial email we get from that process. This is one of 2 email we get from that process. Again, we get really pertinent information, your file name, your run group name. As I mentioned, I changed it to _2. The year and month of the base of your transaction within that. So now I'm targeting 2019-06 instead of 2018 from before. Earlier, I was trying to target a closed period to show you guys the impact to that. When you're trying to post something that's closed, it will not work. My transaction amount was 0. These are truly the credit and debit within your file. And of course, our famous footer table below with nice information. So that means the interface is running. It has completed the validation. It checked the open period. It said actually open. So when you do get that email, that means you're in good shape and it should be actually posting. And this is the second email we get. So at this point, that means the actual transaction has been DB import, and it ran the edit mode, and it's probably running right now the update mode as well. So let's go check in here, see what's going on. I'm going here. This is the results screen, so I'm going to go check. See, already it completed this is the actual edit mode only, no updates, and that's the update portion of it. So this guy means if this guy is complete, no errors right here, that means it created posting transactions. I'm going to go in my posting journal, the actual journal table under release, because that's, like I said, it creates under release right here. So that's my file. You see, notice the _2. So this could create a posting. They're under, if I double click on that, just to show you, it will create me that. So those are transaction comments, the total. This is my summary total if you want to see it. This is matching all my amounts within that. These are detailed transactions within your file. So these are the 2 records that I got. Well, it's loading. So those are the 2 records. And I want to I'll take it one step. See the release status? It's under release status. And just want to show you, if I open one of those, I just want to show you where that resides now, the actual business class. It's called General Ledger. So if I click somewhere, anywhere here, see General Ledger transaction, that is the business class table where posting transaction resides. So that's where the stuff is. So this guy right now, it's under release status, as you can see right here. But once I post it, it will be on the same table, but it will be under posted status. So let's go back to under journal, under release. So this is mine, it's completed, no errors. I'm going to right click, quick post, and that's going to do the actual physical posting. And like I said, if you configure your system to quick post to be automatic, I wouldn't have to do these steps. It would have come here and you won't even see it, but it will do the posting for you. I've seen that in one of the environment for one of our clients. So this is your posting and now posted here. So that's the whole thing now, you see the 5 or 6 transaction or manual intervention we had to do in the past. Now we just have to do the move of the file to the proper folder under I use FileZilla, but any SFTP system you may want to use. So if clients want to have their system to FTP the file into a specific folder, the file channel will detect it and it gets consumed and processed all the way through. And the system, the interface, the application is so well configured, it does validation. It won't load garbage into your system. And basically you won't be stuck in having to clean that up into GLTransactionInterface here. You don't want to do cleanup in FSM itself. You want to do a cleanup under your CSV file where it's better and easier to fix. So that's pretty much it. So I'm not sure if we have any questions, but I'll jump to the PowerPoint presentation. There we go. So hints and tips. So this is a bonus for you guys. What's the high risk of processing invalid data or doing this same process without doing any validation? The main risk for that is you're bringing data with bad data into your system in FSM. Most likely, if you run into update mode, you actually bring that in with errors as well, which you need to clean up. And once those postings are created under release, you still need to post them to be able to reverse them to clean that up. So it's, again, very important to clean your data and use validation prior for you to load that file in the system. Same thing on zero balance, your monthly file, your daily file, whatever file you got, you should always have a zero net balance as a good practice to bring that in. Date, transaction date, and to me, posting date and transaction date, that means you're hitting a certain period. I like to keep it within the same period that you're trying to target. So keep it clean. Some people want to do a full year worth of data. I mean, the system will allow it. It will allow you to do it, but I wouldn't recommend that. In our case, for this client we are loading 2004 to 2020 historical data using this process with the monthly balance file. And you can actually have detailed transaction file, doesn't matter, it's just more transaction to it, and you can actually do it. So this is very nice and powerful system. And this interface can also be used to keep on bringing new transaction interface to your system ongoing after that. In our case, we have a mainframe system that we pull in data for the GL to bring that in, even after go live, because we're not fully converted yet. So we had that transition. So that same process does it for you. The validation also validates against FSM. So this is a beauty. This is a nice addition we did. And not only we validate your file, but we also validate against your current system FSM in whatever environment you're pointing to, like production, test, dev. So it does a nice validation against your system. I also recommend you use the same run group. As I mentioned, run group is a key element to process a file in FSM for this type of function. So run group is nice to have the same for the same type of data for that grouping you want to do in process. Again, we use this process to load the historical data for conversion, and it works really well. It takes me not even a couple hours to load years of data. So very nice, efficient, and I know that data is clean because it's truly validated and it loads properly, no errors. Some bad posting, again, this is just a hint. If you do all this step without the validation, even without the edit process, you do directly and do update mode directly. If you have bad posting and not zero balance, you would have to do a reversal, and we do have documentation to do all that. We have that process defined. You could do it, but you're just adding extra step for you to clean that up. And those transactions don't go away. The fact you post it to your system, you need to proceed with reversal to clean that up. Again, I always use transaction interface in edit mode first. This is part of the steps. It's always recommended. Edit mode is the same as update mode, but no update, and it does a very thorough validation against your system. If you have no errors in edit mode, most likely, 99.9%, you'll run in update mode with no errors. So this is a nice precaution to not create posting and validate your file before posting. Well, I just want to point out the last point is the RPI team, we built a similar process without the file channels, without the update and DB import to FSM. We built what I call a flat base file validation process. So the whole validation steps that we have in our current interface, we move in here and define a batch process. And that basically looks like a global variable file name, which file name you want to validate. And you have a place folder for that on the same as FTP. We have another location for that. You place your file there, and if it does validation, same thing, and it sends an email to the client to say, here's what's wrong with your file. So we use that to validate all the client's file without doing any update to FSM, and it was really useful. So we had that process as well. Any question? We're open to question if anybody has any question. And while we wait for a question, I just want to reiterate that, Jonathan, you did mention that. So we built this process as far as it uses a file channel, it uses IPA, right? An IPA interface for it. We configure it for a couple of clients now. And the way we structured it is very well built and very easy to adapt for the client's needs. So based on their setting, based on their configuration on their FSM, like some clients use accounting unit, account code. Some of them don't use account code, they use something else in finance dimension. So depending what you use in your system, it's a very easy to modify interface, so we can adapt it for your need and based on the validation you want to see for your needs. And the rest of the core of the actual function stays the same as far as that business process for GL transaction interface is always the same. So.
Yeah. Oh, Jean, looks like we have another question. Do you have a similar process for AP uploads?
Actually, good point. Actually, I looked at the AP. We have a few other processes, and that's a great question, actually. For the time being, no, we don't, but we are looking at that right now because I did look at some other process like an AP and some other one too. I look on the FSM side where they use similar process. What I mean by that, they use an interim GL transaction interface file, and the same type of action to bring that data in also exists. So to answer that question, no, currently we don't, but it would be very, very easy for us to build an infrastructure for that process. It's just different business class and different tables to hit and adjust the validation for that. I totally understand that some other function within FSM and even HCM use that same type of function, same technology, if you want, same infrastructure as far as an interim table, and then you can do action to process that data through. That can be easily adapted to do that type of stuff. Similar to what we built, you just copy that framework and it could be easily built, yes.